The hypothalamus is a part of the limbic system in the brain, and the limbic system is the center for emotions and for motivation and drive for behavior. So it's a really interesting place to hang out. And the hypothalamus hangs out there most notably with amygdala, but also with hippocampus, and it jives with the pituitary gland. There's a lot going on in this small section of the brain. And if you're familiar with the handy-dandy brain model, so this is made famous by Dr. Dan Siegel, the hypothalamus is going to live in this middle section, so this being the brain stem, and this being the middle part, the juicy bits of the brain, and then this being the neocortex and then the prefrontal cortex down here. So we're talking about this area right in here. And the hippocampus is usually, hypothalamus is usually described as the brain of the endocrine system. I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you here. In case it's been a while since health class or you don't remember, the endocrine system is the system that regulates all of the hormonal activity in our bodies. So this is everything from insulin to testosterone and progesterone and cortisol and adrenaline. We have hundreds of hormones in our bodies, and popular science doesn't like to talk about a lot of those. It talks about the stress hormones, so your cortisol, your adrenaline, your norepinephrine, those are the big three, and yet there are dozens more. And then the sex hormones or reproductive hormones like estrogen and testosterone and progesterone. We don't hear a lot about hormones outside of that. So hippocampus, why do I keep saying that? Hypothalamus is the place where all of this hormonal activity originates. It's the mastermind of the endocrine system. So there are a couple of things that I think from a parent's perspective are useful to know about hypothalamus, and I said it right that time. I'm so proud of myself. The first is that hypothalamus is kind of the end piece in this really complicated chain of how we get from thinking about something to exhibiting behavior about something. And we're going to talk about all of that. But it helps us understand that there is stuff behind behavior, that it's not just behavior that we're seeing that comes out of nowhere. There's always an explanation. The other thing with hypothalamus is that because it involves hormones, hormones are chemical messages that the body sends back and forth to and from organs, tissues, muscles, all of that, all of the time. It's like an army of bicycle couriers in an urban environment. They're everywhere. They're going all over the place, and they're really fast. So hormones start and stop every process in the body. They're in charge of relaying to certain types of cells when they're supposed to be doing things and when they can stop doing things. And the hypothalamus is in charge of that. So there's this important part of this in noting that there are chemical changes that happen that are related to our behavior. And when we can understand that and appreciate that perspective, it makes it easier to see behavior as behavior and not as personality or an attitude problem or something like that, which is where parents go a lot of the time. And not just parents. I mean, the adults that don't have kids or adults that are interacting with other adults will tend to go to the place where they're just saying, oh, well, you're a really crummy person, and not looking at the behavior. So let's talk about that. And before I go on, I just want to say that I don't normally, well, okay, that's a lie. I do normally wear a ski parka in the house because I am cold all the time. And what you don't see is that I have another fleece on underneath this, and then I have a long sleeve shirt on underneath that. We do have heat and we do use it. It's just that I am always cold. I'm that person, that annoying person that is head to toe. I did do you a favor and I took off my earmuff before I started this because that was just a little too ridiculous. So let's talk about hypothalamus. So behavior starts from a thought. And if we think about behavior as an iceberg, we know from science, in whatever grade that was, that, 80% of the mass of an iceberg, something like that, is below the surface of the water. We can't see it, but we know that it's there, and we know that it's massive. So there's a lot to behavior that we don't see on the surface. It's very much the same kind of idea. And all of that starts with thoughts. So we have certain thoughts. We're taking in a lot of information from the environment, from all of our senses, and we're processing that, and we're making decisions about what's important and what's not, what's valuable, what can we use, what do we need to put away for later, all of this kind of stuff. And when that process happens throughout the neocortex, which is that wrinkly top layer of the brain right in here, and when it comes to decisions, those are in the prefrontal cortex, which is the space that's right behind the forehead and behind the eyes. So it's the part in this brain model that comes around and down in the front. And so we make these decisions, and then the brain says, okay, well, we're going to ship this off, and that information comes to amygdala, which is in the limbic system. So it's in this middle section, and there's a lot of back and forth between these two. It's not as though this is very much of a factory assembly line kind of process. The information that comes in through our senses winds up going to both of these places at the same time in most cases. So there's a lot of communication back and forth, and these are mostly concurrent processes, not linear, just in case you care. And so it's going into the amygdala, and amygdala, we know it best as the alarm system of the brain. It detects and constantly scans the environment. I think it's about 5 times per second that it's looking and it's saying, is this safe? Is this safe? Is it safe? So it sounds the alarm that triggers the call for fight, flight, or flee response, the stress response that we have. But amygdala also determines how we feel about certain things. So it's processing all of this information that it's getting from the senses and the feedback that it gets from the prefrontal cortex. And it's looking at that, and it's kind of going, okay, well, we've done this in the past, and we've done this in the past, and we've done this in the past. So I've determined that we're going to feel this about this particular thought. So it comes up with whatever emotion that is, or cluster of feelings, which would be an emotional state. And it's going to send that message on to hypothalamus, just up the way a little bit. Now, hypothalamus translates, so we started with the thoughts, went to feelings, so these two are together, translates those feelings into physical signs. It's this is what we see as behavior, as reactions, as responses. So hypothalamus registers this information from amygdala. It says, thank you very much. Now I have some work to do. Okay, everybody, we're really angry about this. So let's increase circulation. Let's increase heart rate. Let's increase respiration. Or we're feeling really sad. So we're going to cue some tears, and we're going to lower heart rate a little bit, and we're going to draw back circulation from fingers and toes because we don't need that right now. All of those things hypothalamus is looking at, and it determines what messages to send through hormones to which organs, which cells, which tissues in the body to get them to come along to express in a physical way what we're feeling. So this is everything from being able to mount a stress response, like I need to run away from something, or I need to fight somebody, or it could be in the complete opposite direction. I'm so happy, I'm overjoyed, I'm going to cry and jump up and down, or I feel really bonded to this person, like we're sharing the same heart or the same soul or something like that. Hypothalamus makes all of this happen. So this is a really complicated thing that we're looking at, and it happens in like less than a second. It's just, man, brains are incredible. They're so fascinating. So when we think thoughts, the brain sends messages back and forth through electrical impulses. We have electricity in our brains, and that's how we transmit information from one part to another. So thoughts are electricity. And then we have the feelings, which are still within the brain's realm. So those are also electrical impulses. And then we get to hypothalamus, and hypothalamus is calling upon the endocrine system to get the hormones going to make all of this stuff physically possible. And those are chemicals. So this whole chain is an electrochemical reaction. And these things are bound together. We cannot have thoughts without having feelings and without having some sort of manifestation of behavior, because they're all so tightly bound together. Likewise, and conversely, when we have behavior, it's impossible to separate that from how we're feeling or just look at behavior as what we're thinking. It's all combined, and it's all designed to be combined. So when we talk about behavioral challenges and issues with children, we tend to oversimplify things and start working on techniques and tools and approaches that we can use to get kids to cooperate with us. And really what we need to do is look underneath that, look under the water at what is in the rest of this iceberg, and look at how the child is feeling and what the child was thinking that led to those feelings, what beliefs, what circumstances, what kind of environment was there. And it's when we go all the way back to these thoughts that we can really make some progress in addressing the behavior. Now, all of that said, we cannot change someone else's behavior. But this helps us have an understanding of what a child might be going through. It's not just that wild behavior, obnoxious behavior, undesirable behavior. It doesn't come out of nowhere. There's always stuff to explain it. And this is true for our own behavior too, because we've all had those moments where we do something and we think, what the heck was that? I mean, where did that come from? If you work backwards, you can start to see, okay, well, this is what I was feeling. What led me to feel that way? What was I thinking about? What drove that? All of it's going to fit together. So that's a really important thing for parents to be aware of, that we're not reducing behavior to a personality quirk or some sort of mishap, that it's this combination of electric impulses and chemical messages that are happening in the body, and it's a very real thing with some deep roots. And the other issue here is that from this whole experience, we can develop some really nasty feedback loops. So let's say we are experiencing, this is usually on the negative side, that we're experiencing some not self-loving thoughts, that I'm really terrible at math is one of the common examples. My teacher tells me that I'm bad at math, that I'm never going to be good at it, so I just shouldn't even try. And so from that, I'm feeling a lot of anxiety, and I'm feeling some unworthiness, and I'm feeling incapable, and probably a bunch of other stuff. I get really nervous about tests. I'm just feeling insecure and unsteady, and I've convinced myself that I'm never going to be good at math. So I'm going to stop trying. So now that I'm feeling all of this and I have these thoughts to back it up, when I go into the classroom for a math test, I'm going to have some physical evidence, some physical signs of anxiety. I'm going to sweat. I'm going to get clammy. My thinking is probably going to be all over the place. And I'm going to start making this a reality for me. I really will be terrible at math. I will be terrible on this test, and I'm probably going to get an F because I'm psyching myself out, right? This is the feedback loop that happens, and it's because of all of this stuff that's coming together. We have the electricity and we have the chemicals that are coming together, and they just continue to feed each other. So these hormones that are coming into our systems can stay, depending on the type of hormone, from 2 to 24 hours. And as long as that hormone is active in the body, it's going to continue to send the message to whatever cell that it's meant to signal that you need to be doing this certain thing, or you need to not be doing this certain thing. And so in the case where we have some chronic stress issues, or we have repeated messages of unworthiness or being unlovable or things like that, all of that stuff stays in the system for a really long time, and it just doesn't ever go away. And so these physical symptoms and signs that we're experiencing about, or that I'm experiencing about being terrible at math, which is totally untrue because I love math and it's awesome and I like math tests. I am going to feel anxious when I go in for the test, and then I'm going to see that my hands are shaking, that I can't think clearly, and that my hand is sweating so much that I can barely hold on to the pencil to solve the problem and write anything down. And so of course I'm going to do poorly on the test. And so that happens, and then I get the feedback from the test, which further emphasizes that, oh my gosh, I really am bad at math. Like, I have this grade now that tells me that I'm bad at math. And so that leads to more of the same feelings, which leads to more of the same physical experiences. And this loop just continues and continues and continues. And it's an emotional experience, and it becomes almost like a habit, really is the best way to explain it. So these are some of the things that we can look out for in ourselves when it comes to things like, well, I'm not a good enough parent. I'm not being responsive. And in our kids, like, I'm really bad at math and I'm never going to be good at math, and I'm not skilled that way. So making sure that we understand that behavior really does have an origin, that it comes from somewhere, and there's a chemical tie to that. So our brain chemistry changes and our body chemistry changes, which is fascinating. And also that chemistry allows us to create patterns, whether for really good, motivating, uplifting patterns, or for disparaging, self-loathing patterns. And being able to see those is really helpful because we can step in and then try to help break the cycle and say, hey, we're going to get ahead of this time, and let's build up some of these thoughts back here so we can start to change your feelings about this. So hypothalamus is really pretty cool. There's a lot more that we could talk about, but we'll save that for another time. Thanks for tuning in.